Skull Party. And welcome to EnterVR, the podcast where we talk about everything virtual reality. I am your host, Chris Miranda, and today I am joined by the elusive James Iliff and Nathan. You're going to have to help me with your last name, sir.
It's Burba. Yeah, you pronounce it Burba.
Awesome.
The Burbs.
Nice. I like that last name.
He also goes by Burbtastic, if you want to go. There's a lot of nicknames. We have a lot of nicknames.
So Nathan Burba and James Iliff, you guys are both from Survios, I believe, and formerly known as Project Holodeck.
Yes, Survios.
Survios.
Project Holodeck.
Thank you. So, so Survios. Let's get this going. How did it come about? What's give me the origin story.
Oh, the origin story. Well, it is a pretty epic history indeed. Let's see. Well, it started way back in March 2012. That's usually the date we subscribe to the origin, sort of like the whole beginning of this movement. But what happened was Nathan and I were working in this place called the MXR Lab, which is basically it's a research facility that's part U.S. military, part USC. So we were at the University of Southern California. We're both in the interactive media program there, and we're doing lots of cool projects. Nathan was working on some Kinect stuff back then, and I was doing a virtual reality project with a motion capture stage. And we are also working with Palmer Luckey. He was our colleague there. And essentially what happened was we basically met up at this virtual reality conference called the IEEE VR conference in Orange County back in March. And we realized that there's all these really cool demos there, but the HMDs were super expensive. They were like $40,000 a piece, and they were really like low field of view. And we also realized that the mocap stages were awesome because you could put on a mocap suit and have sort of like trackers all of your body, and you could experience full avatar embodiment. But that was also like $200,000, $300,000 to have a setup like that. So we were trying to like rack our brains about how we could make a system that was really cheap, essentially like less than $1,000. Anybody could make it, right? And Palmer at the time was working on this new prototype at home, outside of the MXR lab. He was working on a new prototype that he called the Rift. And he wanted to integrate the Rift with motion controls, and that's what we were really into, was motion controls. And so we decided to start this project called Project Holodeck, and basically create full motion VR games for a system that has motion controls and a wide field of view head mount. And it was super like prototypey, and it was really bare bones, but we hit it off, and then in April we pitched this idea to the USC Games program and said we want to make a full-fledged game with Razer Hydro controllers, a PS Move to track your head, and Palmer's new prototype. And they were like, awesome, that was great. And at that meeting actually was one of our professors, Laird Mollamed.
Yeah, both Laird and Palmer were at that meeting. Palmer was showing a very early head-mounted display. This is before the Oculus Rift, to the people at that meeting. And Laird was actually one of the judges for the project.
Right. So that was like, 9 months before Palmer ended up hiring Laird as their chief operating officer. So it's sort of like, it's all in the family kind of thing. It's like really early going. And so, yeah, we actually introduced Palmer to Laird like way back then.
So, yeah.
That was Laird's first sort of experience with what Palmer was working on. So it's really cool to kind of get everybody together. And so we launched Project Holodeck around April, and at the same time, John Carmack reached out to Palmer and said, hey, I saw this really cool stuff on the MTBS 3D forums. I'd really love to check out your prototype. And Palmer's like, well, I only have one, but you're John Carmack, so here you go. And he just like sends it off to him. And you can't really blame him. Like, if John Carmack comes out of nowhere and says, I want to see your work, and all you have is this one thing, you're just gonna give it to the guy. So he did, and John Carmack spent 2 weeks integrating that prototype with like the Doom 3. I don't know if it was the VFG edition. I think it may have just been the normal Doom 3, but he was the one who created the original pre-warping code that worked with Palmer's prototype.
It was the Rage engine.
It was the Rage engine. And then, it kind of all went from there. Like, John Carmack was like, hey, I want to take this to E3 and show it off at the Doom 3 booth. And this was E3 2012. And Palmer was starting this Kickstarter that was originally going to be like a really small grassroots Kickstarter with like 100 units. And then, of course, that blew up. So E3 basically made the Rift kind of take over the industry in a way because it got a lot of press attention. I think it actually won Best in Show at E3 that year, even though it was just a bare bones prototype. So it was really making waves. And then that's when Palmer met the team from Gaikai. When Gaikai was bought by Sony, the executive team from Gaikai left and met Palmer. And that's Brendan and Nathan and all those guys, and Mike Lantonoff, their chief software architect. They met up with Palmer and said, "We love this thing. Let's turn this into a business and let's make this into a product." And then they launched a Kickstarter. And then even still, like when you watch a Kickstarter to this day, it's just incredible. Like the people they got together to support it, and it was just this amazing moment. And then right around, I think it was August or September of 2012, that's when the Kickstarter went up, and it just exploded. And so now they got 40,000 units out in the wild, and it's been a huge running success story with Oculus. And so we're really stoked to have been part of that experience from the beginning and kind of get an early take on where this hardware is going, because it really enabled Nathan and I to build a team at USC really early on and start making full motion VR games before VR gaming was really even an idea. And so that's been a huge exciting moment for us.
Yeah, and meanwhile, at Project Holodeck back at USC, we were actually working with a precursor. Yes, it's fine. We were working with a precursor to the Oculus Rift called the socket head mounted display, which was designed by Palmer for the Mixed Reality Lab, and somewhat comparable. And we were able to mix that with the PlayStation Move and the Razer Hydra, along with Unity and game networking and laptops that you wore on your back, and kind of this system that allowed two players to be completely wireless in virtual reality together. And we created a game for that named Wild Skies, and then another game for it named Zombies on the Holodeck. And these were the two games that we had as part of our system for Project Holodeck. And in May of 2013, I'll go back a little bit. I believe it was February or March of 2013 is when we first received our Oculus Rifts from Palmer. So that allowed us to integrate those into the system and take out the socket head mounted display. And then in May, that's when we we finalized the system, we demoed it for USC, and that was kind of the culmination of Project Holodeck. And then 1 month later, June 2013 is when we incorporated as Survios to kind of continue the project in kind of a corporate sense, to build a team and to build what we believe to be the holy grail consumer product for virtual reality.
Yeah, oh my God, the Zombies game is still so much fun. We actually just had a bunch of guys come over here from Be Real this morning and play the new version of Zombies that we made with the HD Oculus Rift unit. And it's crazy, so much fun. I really wish I could show you, but we have a whole new version with all kinds of fast zombies, and it's a new art pass on it, and it's really intense. It is really scary. We got some video footage, but there's something about it when you have positional tracking and you can see your hands, you can move around in a virtual space. It pretty much it almost eliminates the simulator sickness problem for a lot of people, but even more so, it's just super action oriented, and you really have that sense of presence, the really strong presence that you can't really get with any other kind of games.
It's the most immersive experience you can have.
Yeah, it's definitely it's sort of like a different category in its own right. You do have to have a fairly sizable portion of your room dedicated to it, kind of like you would with a Kinect or something. But so it's not sit down at your PC, but it's still I think it's really liberating compared to most just a first person shooter, but. And did you get to try our prototype at SVVR?
I did get to try it, and it was I wanted to stay in there longer. that was my only thing. Because it was it was getting to a point where I was like, oh, I'm getting the hang of the weapons and how to how to strategize the zombies and stuff, and it was so much fun. I really looking forward to what's next, and that leads me to my next question. What's next for you guys? What is Survios gonna do? In conjunction with the Oculus's launch, what's gonna happen? What are you guys thinking about the future?
Well, we have a top secret project with 20 of the world's top scientists working underground, and we're creating some crazy technology that we can't talk about. That's pretty much what's going on.
Did you say 20 top scientists? You meant 200.
200 of the top scientists, and it's like a bat cave, pretty much. Like literally, there's like a hole right in the floor that we take this ladder right down to like 40 floors below sea level, and it's pretty epic. I'll take you there sometime. It's pretty cool.
So you guys are running Manhattan Project Part 2.
Yes.
Wow. That's
yes,
awesome.
Pretty much. We're creating an army of robots in conjunction with NASA, and we're going to take over. I don't know. What are we going to take over first?
What James is trying to say is that we're making something awesome, and we can't tell you that much about it.
Thank you. That was perfect. And
I was just trying to be dramatic. I don't know, adding some flair.
I like that. And, I like that. I just there's so much anticipation coming out. Just with the Rift, Crystal Cove, and what the consumer number 1 is gonna look like, and then you're dropping this mystical wizardry that I have no idea what it is that you're working on. I feel like the story of the VR enthusiast is a story of anticipation and just waiting for this awesome technology to come out. So that's cool. That's really cool. So how many people are working on your team right now?
Right now we're in-house. There's about 8 employees and a few contractors, and then externally, we have a team of probably, I'd say 25 now, including there's a lot of our external agencies we're working with. So it's very, very, very small. Very grassroots effort, but we're all working 14-hour days, and we love it, and gotta have breaks every now and then, of course, but it's good. Like, we're rocking and rolling. It's really fun, and we have a lot of different projects going on too. The main one, of course, is a prototype we showed at SVVR. We have a lot of stuff about that on our website, and we're still going to keep doing showcases as much as possible, just to because we really want to show people what full motion VR is like, in like a real space. And so part of what we're doing is just evangelizing that idea as well, in addition to our own projects. Just because I think that is, ultimately it's going to be kind of like bringing Disney into your home. It's going to be like having a theme park in your living room. So in a way it's kind of borrowing some elements from the arcade. Like the original idea of the arcade in the 80s and 90s was you could go to a place where you have very interactive experiences that you couldn't have anywhere else, even with a home console. But I think we're finally getting to that point where you can have a consumer, a whole array of consumer products where it's insanely interactive and insanely immersive, like even more so than what motion controls has been doing up until now. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the industry's going.
I'm full of anticipation. At what point did you realize, for you, Nathan and James, at what point did you guys realize this is something? There's something here. What was it the Kickstarter? Was it way back John Carmack? What made it?
To me, it was before all of that. I saw the FOV to go viewer at the Mixed Reality Lab way back in February of 2012. And I saw the real ease of use of creating a wireless head-mounted display by simply putting an iPhone in this cardboard viewer with lenses. And then I was working on the Kinect at that time, and I basically just had the idea of put the two together, and okay, now you're in full-body wireless virtual reality, and if there's some audio in there, and then you can see your entire body underneath and walk around. You can do it multiplayer.
And it's like a smartphone.
And just that technology, it made me realize it was possible. It was possible to have this tremendous experience at a consumer price point, do it in your house, do it wirelessly, and then, of course, to play games with it. I mean, games were really kind of the crucial piece of it, because when you start making games for something, games themselves are very, very immersive. You put games in virtual reality, which is inherently immersive, and you get something that's super immersive. And so I realized that back then, and I started kind of looking around, seeing who else was interested in the space. And but from then on, it's always been that same kind of core idea of getting this holy grail experience. I don't even want to say holy grail virtual reality experience. It's just holy grail experience that you can have in your house. And to me, I've always been, for the past 2 years, I've been working toward that same goal.
Yeah, and that's how I met Nathan, was at the MXR lab. I was working on, I think like the moment for me is a little bit different. I wasn't working with Kinect stuff as much as Nate. I always thought the Kinect was cool, but I didn't really have the developer chops to get into it. But I was back in August 2011, so this is, a good 2.5 I don't know, 3.5 years ago. Back in 2011, I was working on this project with it was essentially a phase space motion capture system, which means you put red LEDs all over your body and you can track your entire body. And then I was using one of Palmer's really early HMD designs that he calls the PR4, I think it's called the PR4, which is basically, it was this very wide field of view. It was larger optics, and it put face space LED trackers around the front of it. I can send you a picture of it. It's pretty cool. It's like this giant golden HMD. It's like covered in gold foil. And we used that with the face space system to create a game, and it was essentially full motion VR. But it was incredibly expensive. Like, it was a huge installation. We needed at least 12 cameras. But we showed it at a few USC events in 2011 and 2012, and that's how I ended up meeting Palmer for the first time. And then eventually, I linked up with Nate, and then we all started working on Project Hollow together after that.
What is the ultimate vision of virtual reality for you guys? I mean, just speaking broadly, and for Survios as well. What's the dream?
You mean like in terms of technology or philosophy or science fiction?
Take me on a wild ride, sir.
Well, there's a lot of different ways it could work. I mean, everyone's talking about like the holodeck and the Matrix or whatever. And when you really boil that down, the holodeck is you have to have the ability to manipulate matter in real time and create force fields and create real objects out of nothing, essentially, in order to visualize the perfect holodeck. And then the Matrix means you have to be able to have electrodes implanted into your brain that precisely manipulate your senses in a very controlled way. And either one of those technologies could happen in the next 200 years. But it might be some combination of the two. You might have augmented reality or virtual reality contacts that you wear, so your visual senses are perfectly manipulated, but your eye is still the middleman. It's not directly manipulating your brain. And then maybe you combine that with electrodes that enhance your sense of texture and your sense of pressure or touch. So then you're directly manipulating the brain, but at the same time you're wearing headphones. So it's good old school headphones, because those pretty much do the job. So you never really know like how it's going to all shake out, but I think in the next 2 centuries or so we'll have something that's going to be near perfect representation of reality. And I say, it's a long scope, but that's just my opinion. I'm not speaking for Nate, but that's just my general thought is, I think a lot of the futurists out there and science fiction writers out there, they have a pretty, I think they have a pretty strong grasp about how long it takes for these types of technologies to develop and how many decades have to go by and different revolutions have to happen. And, Star Trek had it right. Like, when was the next generation took place in? Like the 22nd century or 23rd century?
Something like that, yeah.
But, right about now, I think the next 10, 20 years, we can, with the current technology we have, we're going to have something that's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
But that's sort of my thoughts.
Yeah, to me, the litmus test of virtual reality is, can you act in virtual reality like you would in real life, using the same parameters of real life? Can you walk around? Can you look around? Can you feel things? Can you hear things? Can you see things? Can you pick things up? Can you kind of take the same things you've learned living in reality and apply them to virtual reality? If you can do that, then the experience is usually there. And to me, I'm really excited about using the human body in virtual reality. If you can jump, if you can duck, if you can crouch, if you can walk around, you can run. Imagine a virtual reality experience where it's an entire warehouse where you're fully tracked and you're playing. Instead of doing a 40-man instance in World of Warcraft, you're doing a 20 versus 20 capture the flag with dragons, and everyone's running around shooting fireballs at each other and having virtual sword fights across a giant battlefield.
That's epic.
I don't think that's. I think that's 3 years from now. Maybe if the key is monetizing that. There's a lot of business problems with that. But from a technological standpoint, someone could make that right now if they really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of like what the VR Arcade guys are doing up in Seattle.
Yeah.
We were in Seattle for Steam Dev Days last week. And I got to meet a lot of cool people. Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet up with the VR Arcade team because we were just like crazy schedules. But yeah, they're using a motion capture system with a Rift and wireless streaming to have something that is very much like that, where you can go to a location, like a physical location, and you can have like the most super awesome immersive experience ever. And I think that's the coolest thing. And I hope it revitalizes what essentially, the arcade was originally, where you can open up a lot of locations around the world, and people will go and people will pay for that. Because, when you think about it, movie theaters didn't always exist. Like, at some point, people realized that filmmaking wasn't just this cool thing of, where you could have persistence of vision, and it's like, wow, it looks real. It turned out, oh my God, we can actually create something entertaining, and we can have people come to us, and we can show them things, and they will pay for it. And that's, that had to be invented. That was a whole process in a whole economy that had to be invented out of nothing. And people did it. Now we have movie theaters everywhere. So, I don't think that it's a stretch at all to think that virtual reality could become as ubiquitous as movies.
I have so many things to say as an evangelist, as an enthusiast that will wind up in an infinite circle jerk amongst each other. So just to change things up a little bit, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate and ask you a couple quote unquote hardball questions.
All right, and we will quote unquote answer them. Here we go.
For someone who is just your average person, what is the value of virtual reality? What do you think? What value will the average person get from this?
Well, it really comes down to, at least for me, what value do you have out of entertainment in general? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people ask this, when you're talking to investors or business people. They say, what pain are you solving?
Yeah.
And that's a question you get a lot, and it's a question that I think is very, very simplistic. Like, when you're talking about a software startup, and it's like, oh, I'm creating Facebook for kittens, and it's awesome. And you say, what pain are you solving? Oh, I'm solving the pain of, kittens not being able to socialize online. It's a very important problem. That I'm kind of being facetious here, but you see a lot of that stuff where there's businesses that it's very easy to answer the pain problem, and there's a lot of cool businesses that come out of that. I know some guys through the PR company that we work with. One of their clients is making a doorbell that you control with your an app on your phone, and you can find out when people ring your doorbell when you're far away, and that's that's a very specific pain point that customers may have, and you can solve it. But with entertainment, it's different. What pain are you solving when you play video games? Well, it's not really a very specific pain point. It's more of an existential one. It's more like I'm bored, so I want to entertain myself for a short period, and maybe I want to escape from something, or maybe I want to experience something new and fresh and exciting that I couldn't have in real life. And that's not you can't narrow that down to a bullet point on a investor presentation. It's sort of like, can you give the original case for creating arcades or for creating the original game consoles? And that's a tough, it's a tough thing to conceive of. But following that same train of thought, for the same reasons that video games and movies and other forms of entertainment are, accepted and loved by consumers, I think VR follows that same pathway of logic, but then multiply that times 100,000 or 1 million, and it's that much better. So I happen to think that VR is a superior medium, which might be a bit, that also might be simplistic, and I'm very much prone to bias because, of course, we all love VR and we're super evangelistic about it, but I think it is very much the ultimate sort of the ultimate medium that solves a lot of shortcomings. So
yeah, shortcomings are reality. I'll just bounce off of that. Like Gene McGonigal's book, Reality is Broken. That's what video games do. They solve the problems of reality. Boredom is a problem of reality. There are some of the economic systems that build the carrots and sticks in reality are okay, but they could potentially be better in a different experience. And the more immersive that experience is, the more you're able to feel those carrots and sticks. Sometimes when you wake up from a dream, you want to go back into the dream. You don't feel like going to your job. You don't feel like driving an hour to get there or doing the things you have to do on a daily basis. This is what entertainment does, and more in particular, this is what interactive entertainment does. It is better than reality. It solves some of those problems in reality. And that's basically what we're doing. We're making something that's cooler than reality, and people naturally want to go there. And some people want to go there more than others.
I gotta tell you, it really is an honor. I'm super I feel like a bit of a fanboy speaking to you guys, and honestly, like I view you guys seriously, and you guys are like you're at the edge of knowledge when it comes to this new industry that I see coming. It's gonna be I feel like, we're talking about video games, but I think that for the average person, education, tourism, the more casual sort of shopping, the more casual sort of experiences that are perhaps mundane in the real world, like who the fuck wants to go to Walmart, or who the fuck let's just go do that thing in VR, and why do I need to be physically at school? You just need my brain, so let me just use telepresence to VR to go to school. And
telepresence in VR is big.
That's huge. Yeah, you definitely had a point. There's so many applications outside of entertainment. Like we tend to come from the entertainment school of thought because that's what we focus on. But there's so many different ways you could use it, like way beyond just video games or movies or entertainment. I mean, yeah, telepresence is a big one. Being able to have like a meeting with anyone at any time in any like space and be able to simulate like anything you want. I think that's one of the coolest things. Like I imagine for me, like I'm like meeting with my brother who lives in New Zealand, but we're meeting virtually, and we're in like some kind of like, I don't know, some kind of crazy space age bar, and we're floating in the middle of a galaxy somewhere. It's like you can do whatever the hell you want. Like you could do pretty much anything, and it could be that much more exciting. So I don't know. It's basically like, you could Skype with someone, or you could hop into a virtual reality land with them, and it's, it solves a lot of problems.
It's entirely different. You're getting a spatial sense, a spatial relation to them, as opposed to this is strictly audio-visual with Skype. But human beings are designed to kind of interact with each other in a spatial way. And that's what telepresence, virtual reality telepresence in particular, is going to do. So I think that's a very, very good use case. But there's a lot of different things that this can be applied to.
Mm-hmm. Keeping in line with being the devil's advocate, and the following question, I'm sure you're gonna get it at your at your Fox News interview. They're gonna ask you at Fox. They're gonna ask you, what about video game addiction? What about kids who just do you have a contingency plan for the day when kids get way too addicted to VR? What's gonna happen then?
Well, behavioral addiction, in my opinion, is something that shouldn't be regulated. People get addicted to anything.
Mm-hmm.
You get addicted to reading. You get addicted to magazines. They're just things that.
I wish I was addicted to reading.
Yeah, that would be.
I'd be way smarter.
Yeah, it's something that as long as you can take off the headset whenever you want, then it's not necessarily your choice to get addicted. It's something that happens over time. But that's a behavioral problem in society that society will find a solution to that. So I don't see it being any different than movies today or television. We have systems in place for this, so there's not really. What's the question? It sounds like a very Fox News question.
Well, in the short term, I think there is a legitimate. There's some meat to that question because for instance, there's no rating system right now for VR games. Is there going to be a rating system that kind of carries over from the video games industry? Probably it'll be something like that. Mm-hmm. Like we've been showcasing at like Indiecade or at the Sweden Games Conference or whatever, and we've had like 7-8-year-old kids come up and they're like ready to go, like let's play some zombies. And it's a very gory, very graphic game. Like there's limbs falling off and there's brains splattering everywhere, and you feel like you're actually there and you're shooting like an automatic weapon. Like it's 100% violence. And we pause for a second and ask the parents, like, listen, you see what's on the screen here, are you sure you really want your kids to play this right now? And then some parents are like, yeah, it's probably better not to, but other parents are like, you know what, it's I'm a game designer, my kids are going to probably be designing games, like I'm cool with it. Like they need to kids need to learn how to separate reality from virtual reality or video games because it's a part of our culture. And maybe that's specific to parents who are game designers, but at the same time, there's a saying that goes like, the last generation, like the last generation's fears are the next generation's literature. So when you think about it, like a long time ago, rock and roll music was, it's the devil, but it's the same thing with video games. Like now it's becoming like very like it's an intellectual pursuit. It's there's a lot of schools of thought around video games and a lot of academics who are studying it as a literature, and it's not it's not as simple as it used to be. And so those types of concerns are, although they are very real, I think that they sort of fall in line with every other concern with every other type of medium, and eventually it'll work itself out. Yeah.
Well, by working itself out, and maybe this is perhaps taking it too far, but again, we don't know. Will society or will people start creating VR addiction boot camps like how they do in Korea for people who play too much StarCraft?
Yeah, I saw them in China, internet addiction in China. And honestly, looking at those kids are futuristic kids. It's the parents who have the problem. If the parents aren't addicted to the internet, that's their problem. Everyone in our entire country right now is addicted to the internet. Just look in your pocket and your cell phone's right there. So I think that's a societal. That internet addiction boot camp is not a solution. It's a problem in that society. That boot camp shouldn't exist at all. Those parents need to pick up some computers and become addicted themselves. Society's going to change, and those are just old institutions trying to react to the changes that are coming too fast. So I don't see, when you say addiction, I don't see addiction at all. I see people, it's the same way we're addicted to sugar, right? This isn't addiction. That's just behavior. That's just a way of life.
Or coffee, coffee.
Or coffee. Coffee's a great example. Our entire society runs on coffee, is addicted to coffee, and we love it, and we wouldn't know how to function in any other way. And once again, I don't call it an addiction. I just call it a culture.
So you're saying like once it's ubiquitous and everyone's doing it, it's not an addiction?
Yeah, those kids who are hanging out and playing StarCraft all day, that's just the future. That's just what they're going to do.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, there is something to that idea of like a dystopia where, I don't know, what's it called? Not an Orwellian dystopia, but a Huxleyan dystopia?
Yeah, well,
where it's like
New World.
It's a dystopia of pleasure, not a dystopia of pain, and where people are so like it's kind of like WALL-E. If you saw the movie WALL-E, it's like people are so absorbed in their pleasures that are constantly stimulating them all the time that society just basically goes like, and it's like nothing happens anymore, and everyone gets fat, and everyone's like stuck into their VR consoles forever.
Aldous Huxley wrote that as a reaction to sound film, I believe, to talkies, about how they were too sensual, how they were too, they were too immersive. That's what he originally wrote that about, and that was the very beginning of film. You compare that to today, where you turn on the television and you can get sex and violence in 10 seconds, and we're still here, we're still fine. We're not. This isn't Brave New World, and it's not 1984. With a government. The alternative dystopia. Right. So I think dystopic fears are just that, and they can be fun to play around with as kind of in literature. But I don't see. I see them as being the same dystopic fears that we've had for a long time.
Well, maybe from our cultural perspective, at least in the United States, it may seem that a dystopia is a fun, fanciful idea, but there's dystopias that exist right now, all over the world, and I don't know if I could totally see something in some region of the world someday. There could easily be a dystopia that is, very deeply ingrained in virtual reality, but I don't think that's going to be something that's happening.
Government-mandated virtual reality.
Government-mandated virtual reality training, training soldiers when they're children in virtual reality and making them kill people. That could happen.
Speaking to those
revenue point for us, but anyway.
So speaking about these dystopic fears, when you talk about these dystopic fears, I feel like those fears are a manifestation of people who don't have the imagination to see that virtual reality can be a positive thing for others.
Yeah, it's not just because it's positive or negative. It's the fact that they're old and their brain is formed to a point where it's getting hard for them to change, and they don't want to change enough to really understand and get something. I mean, everyone goes through this. You get to a certain age, and there's something completely new comes out. There's a sea change, and you kind of look at it and you say to yourself, I'm going to need to do so much work to get into this new thing. You can either get into it, or you can kind of be curmudgeonly and and diss it. Those are
that was Snapchat for me for a while.
That was aggressive dubstep. Like aggressive dubstep. I listened to it and it's just like I feel like it's Optimus Prime having sex with a washing machine. Like,
that sounds amazing.
That's what happens when you listen to dubstep. You should stick with like hard trance instead. It's much better.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's a great workout music. So sticking with the devil's advocate, you know, and you already sort of touched this earlier, but they're gonna say, so but look at this virtual reality. You know, it's gotten to a point where it feels so real. You know, are we? You know, we went from the point where people used to hold controllers and had TVs 10 feet away from them, and now they're inside this world killing people inside Battlefield 3 or Battlefield whatever. And you know, and they're like, is that jump between the interface to the interface, is that doing something to the brain differently? Will that make people more violent?
That's interesting.
It definitely is, but I will say this about realism and about killing in particular.
Yeah.
The system of something like a Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4.
Battlefield 4, yeah.
It's so... That system is... You know, 1 millionth as complicated or 1 billionth as complicated as one human brain. And the difference between killing people in Battlefield 4 or any simulation for that matter that we can create with current technology is always going to be completely different than real violence.
Yes.
What it is a fantasy facsimile of violence that has some of the same things, so you get some of the same feeling from it. But there's fundamental things about the real world that is so complicated that with our current technology, maybe in the future, but with our current technology, we can never ever replicate it. So that always drives a difference between fantasy violence. Even the most gory, most insane fantasy violence on television will still never compare to the filmed violence that occurred in the Holocaust in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. You can still never have it compare because there's just something so real about actual realism. So I just want to put that out there, saying that even if you make a really violent video game, it's that it doesn't turn people into violent, or get people accustomed to violence. The people who play violent video games, they cut their finger and they might pass out.
Even if
it's still completely.
Well,
and so they'll ask.
Debate, but,
And so they'll ask, even if the parent, so they'll say that's fine and all. And again, I'm helping you guys out here. And they'll say that's fine and all. But then they're like, the paradigm through which we consume this media has changed radically. Again, it's the same. We haven't seen the long-term effects of this new paradigm of consuming media on the human brain,
Sure.
So
here, let me tell you every parent's greatest fear about virtual reality. They're going to come home from work and they're going to see their 7 or 8 year old child in the living room with a head-mounted display strapped to their face, and they're going to be gunning down soldiers left and right, and they're going to be totally sensory deprived of everything else, and they're going to be doing it for hours on end. That's every parent's greatest fear. And I can see why that might seem scary. But at the end of the day, when technology is pushing forward and there's much more immersive interfaces for using things, and it is making progress, games are just going to be basically one example of how this technology is moving, basically society forward. I mean, we're going to be using interfaces of this kind, whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality or what have you, in all kinds of applications, and it's going to permeate everything. And so, in a sense, that fear might be kind of it seems scary now, but when when we get to that point, it's going to be kind of a misplaced fear because like Nate said, everyone's going to be doing it.
Well, and I can relate this to the fears for regular video games. They do fundamentally change behavior. People who play video games, I think I read a study once where it said basically video games have boiled down to this. They make people more analytical, they make them smarter and have better reflexes, and they make them pay attention to things like school less. And so the first thing is...
So the way we teach people needs to change.
Well,
that's one thing.
Yeah, that's basically... the first part, obviously, you're practicing your reflexes all the time, so they get better. You're solving puzzles, so you get more analytical. You might get more empathetic because of narrative and story and that sort of thing. And you pay attention to school less because, frankly, school sucks. It's just not as interesting as the games you're playing. Yeah. And so it's not that these things are taking away from, the school is so important, kids need to, pay more attention in school. It's not that, it's that school needs to evolve to get, to be able to, if it's important, it should seem like it's important. And if it doesn't seem like it's important, maybe it's not, or maybe you're doing it wrong. When I was in high school, history was the most boring thing in the world. Now I live for Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Yes!
That's great.
Can't wait to listen to him. It's fantastic. He's my hero. Why is that schism there? Why I hate one thing or one point and I love something, the same exact thing later on. It's just because the format with which we teach people, and then even how we teach people, and how we try to cram kids who are just full of energy and just want to run around. We try to cram them with information, and then
stuff them into a chair.
Right, stuff them in a chair, and then adults who don't mind being stuffed into a chair, being crammed with information, somehow they don't get any of the information, they have to go out and work. I mean, our society seems to, I don't know, these things need to evolve as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's tragic. It's tragic that we're still stuck with the education models, structures that we've been using for the last 120 to 130 years. It's ridiculous. It's the 21st century, and I feel like virtual reality should be, it's sooner or later, virtual reality, I think, will be the enhancer or the holy grail to education that we all been looking for. It's just this thing, that idea of traveling to places, the solar system, Rome. It's just.
Or even going back to history. I mean, imagine actually being there at Waterloo when Napoleon fell off his horse.
Oh my God.
Just any historical event, being able to perceive it from different perspectives, actually feeling like you're there. The possibilities are, it opens up a ton of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's going to inspire interest in, well, not just history, but education in general. Like, just one small example of this already happening is one of my favorite Rift demos or Rift experiences is Titans of Space.
Yeah.
Where you just literally just sit back and you're floating around looking at planets, and like there's this cerebral sort of, mysterious music playing. It feels very spacey, and I'm just like, this shit is awesome. Like, I love astronomy now, and I wish I had this when I was in 4th grade. But I didn't. Instead we were stuck with like these little tiny plastic replicas of the solar system, and it was kind of interesting. But imagine that for any subject. And students who are attuned to mathematics, there will be systems for learning mathematics that are insanely interesting.
I love it.
And for any other subject, I think it could, just biology. Looking at molecules, anything. It's going to be a revolution, and I just hope that the education industry, because it is an industry, I hope the education industry catches up.
Yeah, for spatial things, I hadn't really thought about it, but molecules and planets, I mean, when you visualize them, look kind of the same.
Yeah.
But it really, that Titans of Space, that really works for the human body, or understanding something like quantum mechanics, or that goes beyond Euclidean space.
But let's take that even a little bit further, because even philosophically, like I was inside Titans of Space, and I had an existential crisis in there, because I had mind you, I was high, but I had this amazing.
That definitely helps.
but I had this realization of holy shit, I am so small, so infinitely small, and my place in the universe is almost nothing. It humbles you. And I think people would find themselves finding value to that sort of experience.
No, it kind of reminds me, there's this part if you read the book series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, there's this part, I can't remember which book, but there's like this machine that you could put people into, and all at once they would realize like their physical size in comparison to the rest of the entire universe, and they would realize it all at once because they would have like a visualizer or something, and they would suddenly realize how insanely inconsequential they were as an individual, and their brain would just explode.
Whoa.
Their brain would just explode. Like, people would go in there, they'd suddenly realize the true size of the universe, and just explode. And I mean, you know how Douglas Adams is, and it's always just the most ridiculous scenarios. But
human beings, we're infinitesimally small and we're infinitesimally large. I mean, if you go the other way, you go down to the smallest elements that we know of, and then we realize there's elements that are smaller than those, and then there may not be smaller elements, and it kind of goes both ways. So.
Yeah,
I don't know where I'm going here. I'm not high, but I sound like it.
To me, I mean, I feel like it's just the whole idea of a three-dimensional user interface, or learning in 3 dimensions, is really something that can't be paralleled with 2D interfaces, and I say 2D interface in the most general sense, like even a piece of paper with writing on it.
Yeah.
That's a 2D interface. A drawing is a 2D interface. Being able to access information in 3 dimensions, I think, is much more natural.
Mm-hmm.
And as human beings, we're just going to be a million times more perceptive. And we're going to be like sponges with information.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to, like, just the way that you can present things in VR is, I think, it's going to accelerate learning, and it's going to accelerate interest. And it could really explode. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see where this goes.
Here's a crazy thought that I hope you guys might be able to indulge me in. I was reading an article earlier about how by 2050 researchers are predicting that 47% of all jobs will be automated.
Yeah.
So where?
Sounds great. We can just relax all day.
But I think about, like, well, what is everybody gonna do with their time? What's gonna?
What people gonna do? They're gonna do whatever they want. I mean, this is the fundamental problem of society, is that we expect everyone to have an 8-hour workday. I mean, think about it. We have the most automated society in the world, and most people work more than 8 hours a day. They work 2 jobs. They work 12 hours a day. It doesn't make sense. There's, once again, some fundamental structures that do not work for society. And the way it should work, theoretically at least, is with more automation, you get more leisure time. Now, sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way, but in theory, it really should. So,
well, this was also a fear in the 1960s, where we had the sentient robots were just around the corner. We thought in the 1980s we were going to have robots doing all of our bidding. And to some extent that did come true with, automating manufacturing lines and stuff. But at the end of the day, maybe by 2050 there is going to be a lot of jobs that are automated. But I don't know. I think there may be a margin of people that become jobless. And that's a very real possibility. But at the same time, I think the idea of a job is evolving.
Yeah. And
I think that people are going to be a lot more creative in their endeavors. And not creative in a strict sense, but, just there's going to be a lot more, people are just going to be moving around and doing a lot more things at once. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
So here's my pie in the sky vision of what that might look like. I think that virtual reality is the ultimate creation tool. I mean, just from a creator standpoint, I can show you I can show you a world from the angle I want to show you. I can show you a sequence of events from precisely to the T what exactly it is that I want to show you. And I think that you mentioned earlier, people will have the leisure to be creators, which is what I think human beings are inherently been born to be. We're all creators. We're all walking around with these supercomputers, 3-pound massive supercomputers on our heads, and we're not using them. I dream of the day when inside virtual reality people will be able to share their dreams with each other, or build models, Minecraft-esque worlds for people to explore with their families together. I think the future looks bright if we can harness this energy, this movement, sometime in the future.
Well, the key is making a creative system that's easy enough for people who don't want to spend years learning it to actually get into and produce something that's of a reasonable level of quality. Whether it's things like Project Spark or Level Editors and Little Big Planet.
Right. Like community workshops like they have on Steam.
Yeah, and those once again, community workshop, you still need to know Maya and you still need to put some things together. And Maya's like 15 years old.
But I mean, I guess referencing the job discussion, every job requires some skill in some area that is, in a sense, it's an expertise in a particular area. And I think people's talents and people's expertise will start transitioning more and more over into the virtual world and less to the physical world as the physical world becomes more automated. So you will have situations where people can set up a lot of, what are essentially storefronts, selling services like software as a service, just like it always has been, selling virtual goods, basically providing experiences for people that other people pay for, and maybe we'll all be using Bitcoins by then. I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting. I think it's just going to evolve, and it's going to be a lot more virtual. So yeah, and you definitely hit the nail on the head. Like, I 100% agree. Like, all human beings are very much creators, and I think we feel fulfilled by creating things and by discovering things. And in the process of discovery and in the process of creation, like, that's what brings about essentially happiness in the most general sense of the word. And I think this new future is going to bring a lot more happiness.
Yeah, this is what video games do, and virtual reality video games as well. I mean, they bring happiness by letting human beings do what they're programmed to do, to collect things, to create things, to explore, to kill things, because frankly we're programmed to do that too. It lets us do that in a way that doesn't harm people or disrupt society. Right.
That's a really interesting point.
There is an interesting point, and I was gonna. There's so many places I can go. I'm deciding which fork in the road am I gonna go. Let's go with this one. That's an interesting thing you mentioned, because Cymatic Bruce, the first time that I went to the first Silicon Valley virtual reality meetup, Cymatic Bruce was doing a quick talk, and he was saying something about video games have lowered violence in low-income neighborhoods. And I think that's very true. I send I have two younger brothers who live in Nicaragua, in the barrios, and I sent them a PS3 because I value the time we spend together playing online, and it also keeps them off the street, which is awesome.
That's crazy.
So I think that you're right on it when you're saying that we will be able to that physicality, that need for violence that we humans have ingrained in our bodies and our brains, because we're not that, the Stone Age and in the Paleo era and the times when we used to be hunter gatherers, those in the grand scheme of things, those are a blink of an eye in time, and so we're still with those brains, we still have those bodies, and now we have this society that we're supposed to be organized, we're supposed to be nice to each other, or what? So I think that video games,
it's so unnatural.
and so video games are sort of a channel through which you can channel that energy, that that inner that wants to you know what I'm saying?
The evolutionary aggression, I guess, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, just like I said, the things that we're wired to do, society, the civilization, as we call it, is not particularly well tuned to that. And I think most people, the problems they have, the problem of a kid not wanting to learn in school, of a guy growing older and not wanting to get a job, whatever it is, those are problems of people not wanting to naturally conform to civilization. And that's just because it's really, really hard to do that. There's people who would love to be able to conform better, but to quelch those animal urges or instincts. Quelch, is that a word? Quelch?
I don't know.
Quench. Quench and squelch are words. I don't know.
Well, you're just a word.
But
just making up shit left and right.
And there's that's one of the main problems of civilization. And so naturally, civilization has outlets. Civilization has games, it has sports, it has art and literature, and all of these things. That kind of broad category of human creation and human experience is our outlet to satisfy our needs while this machine of civilization keeps moving forward.
So here's the next the most obvious obstacle right now for us. I feel like, I look at you guys, and you seem pretty young. I feel like we're part of the same generation. And so we were talking about earlier how the older generation and older generations will fear this new technology. How, as a community, as creators, as people who are enthused about virtual reality, what can we do to bring down those fears? How can we bring in that older generation to virtual reality, to show them, hey, it's not as bad as you think? What do you think?
I'd say put as many HMDs on their faces as possible, because the technology speaks for itself. If you look at old generational fears, like the rise of rock and roll or whatever has happened in the past century, there's a million of them.
Yeah.
My grandparents' generation, when they heard rock and roll, they fucking hated it, and they thought it was terrible. And my dad's generation, who grew up in came of age in the 60s and was tripping acid and smoking weed for the first time, it seemed like a very strange cultural shift, and it was very scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But this is way less scary than any of that, in comparison, because I think that, because displays and computers and interfaces are so ubiquitous these days, although it's a very strong immersion jump, it's not necessarily a strong jump in terms of how it's being used and the purpose of it. So I think if you have anybody from, an older generation who thinks that this is scary, give them an HMD and have them play a really cool Rift demo, and they'll be like, oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah, and I think
or at least that's step number one.
And for people who have kids who are already using iPads on unregulated internet, unregulated internet, they're pretty much, those kids, Pandora's box is open. Yeah, and I almost see them looking at this as like, oh, there's another thing little Jimmy has. Yeah, get out of here, you little bastard. That's pretty much how I see it. And that's always my kid. My kid always bastard. I don't see. I think James is very correct in that. Is technology is so ubiquitous that it's just another piece of technology where we're so used to it that it's not going to shock us. Whereas those early pieces of technology that people would immerse themselves in, they would compare. It's like, oh, television. That was one of the very first things that piece of technology everyone had to own besides the radio. But it brought in kind of a visual medium. In such a powerful way that nothing had done before, that I think that obviously did shock a lot of people. But I think people, games are played so often, people watch so much television, people watch so many movies, they're on Facebook, they're on social media all the time.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind what kids have access to these days. Like, literally, when I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 14, and my parents almost didn't give me one because they thought I was way too young. And now I see, 7, 8, 9-year-olds walk around with the entire, world of knowledge in their pocket.
Yeah.
And totally unregulated. They can look up porn if they want to. Every kid's seen porn these days, I feel like. It doesn't even matter anymore.
Well, they learn at an early age to kind of see it and filter it out.
And it's just a very different process now that, even to me as a generation behind kids that are growing up now, it almost does seem a little bit shocking, but at the same time, I'm very accepting of it because I feel like it's just a transition, and I think everyone's evolving, and that's just the way it is, and I think it's fine.
Transition to what do you think we're transitioning to?
So a world full of
ubiquitous devices,
smarter, more intelligent, faster people who can think faster,
and I think people who can be responsible. Much more responsible with what they take in as input,
Yeah, and I think there's, people have said that people have a harder time reading longer articles today than they did 20 years ago, and, there are some changes into how people's brains have been developing and processing information, but I don't think it's going to end up being, I see it all as being pretty positive. I think people think differently today, but it doesn't mean they can't think deeply or they can't think complexly about things. I actually think quite the opposite.
And there's always ways that you can regulate things, at least passively. And I think there's ways that there's always going to be a system in place for parental controls, and if you're a responsible parent, you can regulate that for your
You can impose your will upon your kids.
I mean, if you want to... That sounds so dark and evil, but I think to some extent it is important because it can't be totally no regulation because it's just so easy to access anything. Like maybe you don't want your kid playing like a super, super violent Grand Theft Auto 25, in virtual reality in 15 years from now because it's very, very strongly simulated violence and that's something that you don't want. That's cool. Like you can regulate that. But at the end of the day, it's just the immersion level and the ubiquity of it is going to be so extreme that it's just going to permeate everything. And I think we're gonna have to learn and grow how to work with that and not work against it.
Well, and also it's very important that this is kind of more of an artistic concept, but things that are ultra-violent, they still have to maintain a certain amount of good taste. Like if you look at Grand Theft Auto, it's very violent and it's also in very, very good taste. Mm-hmm. And that's why you're able to get away. You're able to get away with the violence because you kind of there's some social commentary in there, and it's done. It's hard to describe, but it's done in a certain way where people say, "Oh, I get it. I see what they're doing." If you look at, for example, a stand-up comedian who uses racism specifically in their stand-up comedy, a lot of times they're able to get away with it because they're using it in a very good way. They make good points, whatever, like a Chris Rock or something. He's able. When I say racism, I mean literally calling someone black or white, and therefore black people walk like this and white people walk like that. That's racism. It's saying one race says one thing and one race says another thing. If they make a truthful point or an interesting point or whatever, you kind of give them a pass. But then when someone makes a joke in bad taste, you don't give them a pass. Yep. Same thing has to do with violence. The same thing has to do with sex. It's all about whether it's gratuitous or not.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's is it gratuitous? Is it in bad taste? Is it and sometimes things in bad taste will rub people the wrong way, whereas you look at something else that's in good taste, but it's much more violent, will actually slide by. The MPAA will give it an R instead of an NC-17.
Like a Tarantino film or something.
Tarantino films are always usually in such fantastic taste that you can do anything on that screen.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow.
And people are just like, it's brilliant.
It's brilliant, yeah, exactly.
Watching Hitler get shot 1.5 million times in the face.
I could just literally stand there like for 20 minutes. Hitler's just dancing on the floor, all being riddled full of bullets, and you're just like, you just have a giant smile on your face, and and everyone loves it. That's exactly. It's a very good example.
Yeah, and so that's I guess a good taste. But so what would be an example of like a video game with bad taste?
I think Postal 2 is the one that always comes to mind, which is straddling that line of good and bad taste.
Okay.
Oh, what's that one about? I haven't heard of it.
I don't know. I can't remember. It's just one where you can piss on people, and Gary Coleman is in it. I don't know. He's not.
That sounds like a very interesting.
There's like you can stuff a cat onto the edge of a shotgun, and then it muffles the shotgun. You see exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's not just.
I'm a cat lover too.
Well, it's like you love cats, but on top of that, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Right? So that has the potential. I'm sure there's jokes out there that involve the death of cats, drowning cats. For some reason, drowning cats is funny to me. I don't know why.
Is that like a meme or something?
No, drowning cats. They used to drown cats. Drowning cats used to be a thing. They used to find there were too many cats. It's just like hunting to cull populations. They used to find cats and drown them. They used to go whaling for oil. You used to do all sorts of crazy things. Yep. But we used to find cats, put them in bags, and drown them. And the death of cats is a very tragic thing. That's not funny. But for some reason, the anachronism is funny.
It's just so ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous to our sensibilities today that it's inherently funny.
Right. It just crosses that line into being humorous because it's so absurd.
It's so absurd. It's like people actually did this, but the cat on the edge of a shotgun is like no one actually did that. It doesn't make any sense. Therefore, it's not funny. It's in bad taste.
It's just really
therefore offensive. Exactly.
Yeah.
So taste is offense relates to taste. And so people who make virtual reality entertainment in the future, just like people who make movies, television, anything else, they need to work hard and they need to make things in good taste that people will like, and the art form will be fine, just like every other art.
So it really is up to the developer. Just like anything else.
Well, the market regulates it as well. When people when they say something in bad taste on the internet, people go crazy after them. So the internet is an amazing negative press machine. And so people, very purposefully make things that other people are going to enjoy and not, attack them for.
Right. I think, if you wanted to, you could create something that's truly horrific in virtual reality. That's much more so than any other medium up until now, because it's so immersive and you have such strong presence. But I don't think people are going to do that as much.
I am.
Things may exist, but I don't think it's going to be so pervasive and so there's not going to be a bunch of stuff that comes out.
But if someone makes that and if it's truthful, if there's truth in their art, then even if it is horrific, it's in good taste and it says something about the human condition.
For example,
it wouldn't win an award at Sundance.
Precisely. So for example, you're talking about horrific, and I think that you're right. If something is truthful and yet horrific, there's still a value to this. So for example, virtual reality journalism. What sort of effect will it have on people when they can view and see the Syrian civil war through the eyes of a child refugee, or see themselves trapped in Saudi Arabia as a woman? These sorts of realities could enhance our own reality through VR.
It's horrific, but it's empathy through horror. You really get to empathize with people, and you get to connect the dots. You don't, it's not they're over there and we're over here. It's wow, I really understand that woman's plight, and I'll think twice before I vote for someone based on who you're going to pick for Secretary of Defense and who we're going to go to war with. Connecting those dots. As Stephen Covey would say, picking up one end of the stick picks up the other end of the stick. That's a very important function of art, and virtual reality video games very much having a new tremendous ability to do that.
Oh, yeah, we think about immersive journalism. A friend of ours...
Nani De La Peña.
Yeah, Nani, she created an immersive journalism piece about...
Hunger in LA.
Yeah, it's called Hunger in LA, and it just shows, you're in a virtual environment, and you show up, and you're in a food line, in, it's in somewhere in downtown Los Angeles, and you're waiting for food, and some guy starts having a seizure on the sidewalk. and you don't know what to do, and like everyone's freaking out. People are calling on the phone, and like an ambulance shows up, and apparently he had like some kind of problem where he needed to get access to food immediately, and but it's just like it was a passive experience, so you had no agency in the situation. So it would be very similar to an immersive newscast where you can put on your VR headset and you'd get access to an omnidirectional camera that would be viewing a scene in real time in another part of the world, and you would be able to witness anything that's going on. And I think what would happen is you'd have this huge paradigm shift where right now news is almost pacifying. Like you see violence on TV every day, and it makes you less and less, I don't know what you want to call it, but less and less empathetic because they're like creating these dramatic stories around it and they're pounding it into your brain, and it's like there's a car chase and there's a shooting and you don't even care anymore. But then all of a sudden, if you have immersive news where you're actually there and you can feel it and see it in real time, it's going to be a 180 shift where all of a sudden there's way more compassion and there's way more empathy and there's way more understanding. And I mean, regardless of the content, whether it's violent or it's not violent or whatever, I think being able to have access to this new technology where you can do gender swapping and you can do environment swapping and you can have complete 180 shifts in what you would normally experience and your perception. Like all of a sudden you could be in anybody's shoes that you can imagine, and you can experience anyone else's experience, and that's going to be a profound shift, I think.
Yeah, I think the fourth estate as we know it, the mainstream media that we currently have, is such shit. It's such shit.
It's really bad.
It's bad.
And just, you saw the what was it? I saw on Reddit someone posted a YouTube video of a CNN interview between the CNN anchor and a congressperson talking about the NSA, in an issue that touches every human being on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And here, middle of the mid sentence, a congresswoman is talking about the NSA and reviewing the current programs and all that stuff. And the CNN anchor stops her dead in her tracks, and she's like, Congresswoman, I gotta stop you right here for now. I have breaking news. Justin Bieber has been arrested in Miami. What the fuck?
Oh my God.
What world do I live in?
Oh my God. The reason that happens is because
it's like, get your priorities straight.
The incentive system is broken, right?
Yeah.
Justin Bieber makes more money for CNN. CNN is a corporation that needs to make money. And therefore,
so you're saying that drives viewers? I guess is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything has incentives, and incentives drive people. I mean, it's economics 101. So to expect CNN or any other corporation to report news and journalism as we usually see it, it's almost amazing we've gotten this far, and we actually have journalism at all. It's kind of, I would like to set up a stronger incentive system for journalism. We need to kind of build it into our society. It was originally put in place, by the founders with freedom of the press, and there's a lot of, people starting with printing presses and distributing pamphlets and that sort of thing, and kind of building up the press in this country. And we have kind of a cultural view of it as being this fourth estate, but it's eroding because the primary incentive systems, money basically, that's not how they work. It's an ideal that's a cultural concept, but it's not really reinforced by the system. So
like objective journalism is kind of not, it's like a thing of the past.
There's not enough money in it, I mean, why is there so little money in objective journalism and so much money in sports? Why does Kobe make, 50 million or 50 might be a little much or something like that.
I have no idea how much Kobe makes. I'm sure it's a lot though.
I think Kobe makes like 30 million or something. Why is that? Why is our society designed that way? There's fundamental human needs there, and people love competition, but there can be better incentive systems and ways of tweaking society to make those things better. So
it's also entertainment. Like you turn on the TV, and now you got news stations that are trying to entertain you for 3 hours, not give you news necessarily. They're trying to keep your eyeballs on the screen.
So what I realized about cable television channels in particular is everything is entertainment. There's something that's a trend that I noticed. Basically, every channel, let's say if a TV show like Seinfeld is being sold, the syndication rights for Seinfeld are being sold for very cheap. And there could be a number of cable channel bidders, right? Normally, way back in the day, it would be like, okay, TBS and a few different channels who typically run comedy television shows would bid on that. In today's day and age, everyone will bid on it. If you own a cable channel, it doesn't matter what the hell you're supposed to be doing, you will bid on something that will make you money. It's stupid not to. Yeah. So what this means is that you go to something like Turner Classic Movies or whatever, or any of those kind of like old school movie channels, whatever they are. And what's on? I don't know, Dog the Bounty Hunter's reality show or some random shit, because it doesn't. They've all lost their identity.
Yeah.
And they're basically just these money machines. There's no one at the helm. These corporations were started by idealistic people who had identities, and their corporations had identities, and now they're run by people who are disconnected from the original founding, and they're just these things that generate revenue. And I think that's the fundamental problem in corporate structures. They don't have good mission statements or whatever, right? Maybe the corporation's concept isn't as good as we thought it was. But these things are getting older, and they just generate revenue. The press is the same exact way, and that's why I like Al Jazeera America coming on board and kind of being a new kid on the block.
That's cool.
And they're able to actually report in a very journalistic fashion, because they're young and they have that.
And it's good news. I go there to those sites just to read legit news.
Well, it's like watching news from 20 years ago. It's like, whoa, people can still do this in today's day and age. They're not. We all don't have to be CNN.
I think in terms of news, I think there is hope in the horizon, because there is a market for people who want the truth. And it's shown through Vice News. Vice is $1 billion company. And that's not by accident. People actually want to know the truth. I feel like VR, it will just be another way to show you the truth.
It's a powerful medium, and it can show you, inner truths or more artistic truths, just like film. The thing about film is a very powerful medium. You watch it in a giant dark room, and you have these epiphanies, just like the one you had in Titans of Space. You have those deep thoughts when you're watching a film. It's the same kind of thing. When you're immersed, when you feel like you're somewhere else, that's when you can have deep thoughts. You can reanalyze your life, and kind of, you can change, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Is VR going to bring the deathbed to the television? Or will television evolve along with virtual reality? What do you guys think?
I think television's going to... I think the internet is the death of television. The internet is the new television. This is almost ridiculous.
Television in terms of the technology, not television in terms of the content.
The content
is great.
Yeah.
But just the technology we use to enjoy that content is changing rapidly.
People like looking at moving images on screens. That's not going anywhere for a long time. And television just being one way of doing that. So
people said that television was going to be the death of radio.
Radio's still great.
Radio's still around, and radio's evolving. Look what we're doing right now, like podcasting. It's a form of radio. It's a new generation.
And even live regular radio is still a fantastic medium. It's still a way of just tuning into the zeitgeist. If something's going down, you turn on the radio. And you can just get wired right into it. But the radio was like Twitter before Twitter.
That's interesting thought. Yeah.
I like that.
Point.
Yeah. Huh.
But it'll be interesting to see what VR brings to the table later on. We're still barely scratching the surface in terms of the type of content that we could have.
Yeah.
But in the next 5-10 years, as we get a better, stronger grasp of what content is becoming conventional and what genres tend to start to emerge for this new technology, that's when we're going to really be able to analyze it in a cultural sense and really see where it can take us.
Speaking of just merging technologies with virtual reality, in the future, what do you guys think will be ubiquitous with virtual reality? I think 3D printers might be one of those things that will go great along a VR headset. I'm not sure what else. Maybe biometric measuring devices that will somehow tie in with your virtual reality experience.
You can tell. So the only way to tell when something is going to explode and be ubiquitous is when it's cheap, it's easy to use. That's when it can kind of be everywhere. And so, with 3D printers, they will not be everywhere until they're easy to use.
They're getting closer. We have one in our office, but it was a big investment, and it breaks down a lot, and it can only do a certain number of things. So it's not like the replicator that we imagined from Star Trek, but it is very, very cool and very useful.
And if people had, if there's a mechanic shop every few blocks where you can go take your 3D printer there and get it fixed and get it serviced, if just like movies or cars, if there's a whole infrastructure in place for something, right, you can make it ubiquitous.
Yeah, I mean, cars are very complicated machines.
Yeah.
And the only way that we've been able to use cars in a ubiquitous way is because we have mechanic shops everywhere, and there's all kinds of information about them, and you could understand how to fix them yourself.
Cars are still damn impressive too. I mean, literally, you fill it up, turn the key, and drive it, and you pretty much can drive that stupid thing after refilling the gas for a good, 30,000 miles before it'll break down, before you absolutely need to change the oil or you absolutely need to do something.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Maybe longer. So cars are just incredible machines that we've been working on for 100 years. It takes a lot of power. Like I said, we're making something that you can mass manufacture cheap. You can make that ubiquitous. Whether or not people use it is another story.
Right, but given enough time, there could be a large infrastructure in place that accompanies virtual reality, where you could have all kinds of things.
Oh, maybe
like haptics, or haptics are a big thing. I'm always thinking about. It's not really near. It's not really at that point where it's. I guess commercializable. What's the word?
Commercially viable.
Well, haptics, I can't really commercialize it yet because it's a bit, it's a bit complicated. There's different types of haptics. There's not really a very strong language about it.
There's been no haptic breakthrough. I mean, at the end of the day, we're able to simulate vision with, I would say, 90% accuracy. With the head-mounted display compared to the real world, or something like that.
Audio is near 100%.
Near 100% audio with headphones, but with haptics, it's like 2%, right? I mean, you can't simulate. Weights. You can't simulate pushback, pressure, all these haptic
or
things.
Texture. Like, the big thing is texture. Like, I was reading about. I have no idea what team is doing this, so don't quote me on this. But I was reading somewhere about technology that would allow you to essentially you would feel like an object, like a ball or something like that, and using electricity and electrodes, it would actually change the texture that you're feeling on the material. So you could feel like. It could feel like corduroy, or it could feel like
rough, or it could feel smooth,
or it could feel rough or smooth, or or it feels like tweed, or it feels like paper, or whatever.
But that bumps that 5% up to like 10%.
Right. But now you gotta have like force feedback, and you gotta have all these other types of things.
Yeah, I mean, show me a virtual reality simulation where you can lean up against a virtual wall that's generic, that's not actually someone placing a wall there, and I'll give you $1 million, or I'll give you $1 billion. Basically, there's just fundamental.
$1 billion is monopoly money.
Haptic technology that's just not that's just a harder problem to solve than the other ones. I mean, frankly, I think the fact that we have screens at all that can show us things is magic. So we have some magic, and we don't have other. We have defense against the dark arts, but we don't have potions or something. There's other things might come down the road, but it's
we're headed where we're headed. We will need magic. Do you think I look at the different peripherals and input devices. I'm personally not satisfied. As amazing as the STEM system looks, and the pre-VR and the accomplishments that they've had, perhaps my expectations are a bit too high. But I want the haptic glove from Ready Player One to be here now. But in your mind, what do you guys think is the ideal perhaps way to interact with virtual reality?
Well, I think gloves are tough, just because they're not. It's hard to make gloves that are one size fits all.
And from an ergonomic perspective, they get sweaty. Well, there's a lot of interesting things to think about. I mean, I'd like to hear if you could clarify, just because it would help me visualize it more. What do you think are the biggest sort of drawbacks to existing motion controls?
I think that there is still a disconnect in my mind, in my brain, that I'm holding a controller here. I might be inside somewhere, but I still feel like there's a plastic thing that I'm using to interact with the computer world, and I feel like true immersive VR needs to get rid of. Because again, it's a layer of immersion that I think can be torn down eventually.
Well, what if you had the ability to track your individual fingers, like each of your digits? Mm-hmm. So, like, what if maybe you weren't holding on to something?
Yeah.
but you could see all your fingers moving separately in VR, and you weren't holding on to anything. And basically, it's just higher fidelity, and so you could see your hand. And would that be another step forward?
I think so. I think being able to see my hand and move it around would and move it and perhaps grab a cup and be like, oh, I'm holding a cup in front of me with this.
Well, so there's the problem is not the moving your fingers. I mean, that was obviously solved with the Power Glove, and that's
right.
The problem is the holding the cup. So something like Ready Player One, they have this magical 90% haptic thing that we have not discovered that makes it feel like you're holding a cup. So because we don't have that, you can have a glove that has full finger sensing, then you have no idea what the hell to do with your fingers. Mm-hmm. And none of the interactions you're doing with your fingers, you pick up a gun.
It's going to be like, everything's going to be like lifting air. Like if I pick up a virtual object, even if I have like a perfect hand representation and everything's tracked perfectly, even with the motion tracking, if you're picking up a water bottle or something, it has no weight and it has no pushback against your fingers, then there's a limitation there, and it's never going to be the ideal. So, so I'm thinking like there's different ways. Like I've heard of technologies that would have like a certain kind of metal that would be in a glove. That would have like metal strips down your fingers, and the metal could solidify or liquefy at will with electricity. It sounds like magic, but I think there was some team at MIT working on something like this. I'd have to do my research. I'm terrible at references.
People were working on the magic.
There is magic that's happening. In terms of haptic gloves and getting that force feedback, another issue is weight. I don't think you're ever going to be able to simulate weight properly. You can simulate gravity with galvanic vestibular stimulation, so you can change your own sensation of balance and your own sensation of gravity. But in terms of the gravity and the weight of another object, like I have no idea where we could start with that. But
right, and it's one of those things where controllers have been they've been around for so long because they actually do simulate grabbing something. They simulate grabbing a controller.
Right.
And as shitty as that sounds,
it's a fairly generic device that can simulate the interaction with many types of objects.
Exactly. So, that's kind of, between the glove and the controller is some sort of holy grail interface. I'm not going to speculate as to what that is because, let's just say I can't say anything. We are working on something.
Man, all right. I like that. I got a little something. Okay. So past just again thinking about pie in the sky, madness. Follow me down the rabbit hole. After gloves or after whatever we have now or we will have in for the next 10, 20 years. What about the idea? Because the other day I was writing for my blog and I realized that the keyboard is terribly cumbersome. It's so, I have these thoughts running through my head and I can't, and my hands can't catch up.
You can't get them out fast enough.
Exactly. What if, what if 2040, 2050 we're able to transmit our thoughts directly through our VR headset, like Dragon Dictation, but instead it'll read your mind. Is that insane, or is that something?
I think it sounds possible. I mean, it sounds logical. I mean, you're about to make sounds with your mouth that represent language that you've learned. Those sounds going to your mouth are represented by electrical signals interpreted, to quote Morpheus, interpreted by your brain. And if there's a way to crack that code of those electrical signals, if they're not person specific, or maybe even they are person specific, and it learns from you how to interpret those electrical signals. Like a lot of electrical devices of today, Mayo, for example, has to learn from your very specific electrical signature, and then it's able to interpret what you're doing from that. So if you had a device like that could learn and could essentially capture those electrical signals before they go to the part of your brain or spinal cord where they end up, going out to your body, captures those, but learns from you what you're doing. That's one way of doing it from a linguistic standpoint, but
I would imagine it's probably going to sound like, it's probably going to be a lot like voice recognition systems where, the computer's recognizing that you're saying something, but you're just going to be like spilling out a bunch of random bullshit that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, basically with your mind, like you can think, English or any other language thoughts in your mind, and they're different than feelings, or they're different than other types of thoughts. They're specific, like, you can say things to yourself in your mind. I'm pretty sure that is linked in your mind to how you actually talk, and it's like one step removed from that. So if there's a way to hook into that, of course, this is probably something that requires brain surgery to actually get in there. But theoretically, that's the problem, is that you only, by shaving your head and putting electrodes on your head, you can only get so far.
Well, there is consumer EEG devices that you can put on the outside of your scalp.
You can read your brain waves.
You can read your brain waves, and there is some latency to it as well. That's why you haven't seen a whole lot of gaming applications using them yet. But like, for example, NeuroSky or the Emotive headset, those are two good examples.
And I personally haven't been very impressed with that technology. I think if there's not those companies in particular, those companies are great, but in general, the ability to read and use brain waves, has not as I always have a big picture of it when I tried it. It's like, okay, that wasn't very impressive. But the
same could be said about any emerging technology. Like, it's a leap and bound from what it was before, but it's never going to quite reach like the fantasy expectation that we all have.
Yeah,
but
basically the ability to get to those electrical signals without surgery somehow, I don't know. Once again, someone inventing some sort of magic to do that. So getting those electrical signals.
Perhaps a Wi-Fi chip inside your brain.
Basically.
Well, I definitely want the NSA reading all my thoughts.
Oh right, then you embed that.
That's my number one goal. When can they know my thoughts?
Well, the thing is, if that chip transmits, it will give you cancer. It will give you cancer, I guarantee that.
Oh, snaps.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it does. No, I don't want that.
Yeah. Well, cancer.
Yeah, well, there's electromagnetic radiation that does exist. It's just very, very minimal. But a chip directly in your brain that's constantly transmitting, that is not good.
Well, scratch that. All right.
But I can see that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to connect the dots from the somewhat limited, somewhat not limited, understanding of technology that I have. Misconceptions, I'm sure, are in there. I'm trying to connect the dots to see if that's possible within my lifetime. And I have to say the answer is yes. There's already, experiments where people are able, who are blind, are able to see in some way because they're able to interpret light and then push it to their retinas in a way that their retinas are still able to see, because people who are blind are not actually entirely blind. Little things like that. Same thing with hearing. Hearing is the same exact way. There's lots of crazy shit coming down the pipe. Whether it gets consumerized, I don't know. That's a different story.
Totally out there and totally maybe off topic, but I remember when we were talking about doing like olfactory senses.
Oh yeah, we had a smell-based system.
We had a smell-based system we were going to use with the original Project Holodeck setup, which is totally another category outside of haptics and outside of visuals and audio, because smell has a unique ability to trigger emotions and memories much faster than any photograph or any music you may hear, and pretty much with any other sense. Like, smell can be instant. That's why, cologne or perfume, if you a former lover, you smell her perfume somewhere, and you're like, oh my god, or rush of memories.
The best implementation of smell ever besides in food is scratch and sniff.
Right.
I miss scratch and sniff.
Scratch and sniff is pretty rad, I gotta say.
Love it. You get a scratch and sniff sticker when you did well on a test, and that was that broke all of the. Economists typically say that if you get rewards for things, as opposed to intrinsic value, it's not very useful. People get over it. The only exception is scratch and sniff stickers. Those will just
right.
But those will be able to incentivize me to do anything. You give me those stickers and I'll jump off a bridge.
Well, I remember there was this thing called what was it called? They had it at the MXR lab. It literally had cartridges of different chemicals that would combine in 80 different ways to create 80 different scents or smells, and you could trigger them through a computer, so through a game engine. And so theoretically, we were thinking we could have smell of fire or a smell of any flowers. We had this idea in the game Wild Skies, where all of a sudden you'd smell flowers, and then this crazy boss fight happens where this really crazy badass ninja chick shows up with all these swords, and she has a perfume, and every time you smell her perfume, you know she's gonna be showing up soon. You have to battle her or something like that.
Yeah, like a smell motif.
Like a smell motif instead of a visual motif or an audio motif.
You guys are gonna cause some Pavlovian trauma to people.
Right. I think it'd be pretty interesting to see where that could go in terms of game mechanics, but of course that ended up being a bit too, let's just call it out of scope for now, but certainly not impossible. in the long run.
Speaking of scope, what about voice recognition in virtual reality? What about the ability to talk, just like you talk to your Xbox with your Kinect 2? Will I be able to navigate virtual world with my voice? Is that something that?
I want to say, just because I worked with voice recognition, and the part of the stuff I worked with was pretty damn easy to get working for anyone's voice to recognize certain phrases. I want to say the answer is yes, especially because you have a head mount and a headset on already. So you're already, so the Xbox and the Kinect has a 4 microphone, kind of triangulation system that it uses to filter things out and connect with your voice. For some reason, the damn thing still doesn't work very well. It works okay, but it's not that kind of holy grail solution. First of all, I think most people only use those a little bit. They're kind of too nervous to use them in public.
Well, I might be considered old and crotchety in 50 years when this technology is ubiquitous, but right now I tend to feel like saying things like "Okay, glass" or "Xbox on" or just shit like that. It's really, I don't know, it's very disconnected.
Without the human element?
I don't like it at all.
Yeah, it's really odd. It's very odd talking to a computer.
Maybe everyone's going to be talking to computers in the future, and we're going to be the generation that says, that's weird, but at the same time, I think it's pretty weird.
Yeah, it's hard. It's just hard to do the mental process of, I don't know, there's no, when you're talking to someone, you're kind of in the moment. There's no moment when you're talking to a computer. It's very, very weird.
Yeah. So it's just responds to your commands, but it's not a conversation.
And you're not sure what also too, there's a problem of feedback. There's not a lot of, when you're talking to someone, you're getting very consistent visual feedback about how they're understanding you. There's lots of very subtle cues they're giving you. You're giving them to now as you're watching through Skype. It's blinking, it's moving,
body facial expressions,
facial expressions, all these things. So computers need to have that kind of very dynamic feedback that allows you to kind of meter or modulate your the way you're talking.
Well, see, vocal inflections work too. If you look at that new movie coming out with Joaquin Phoenix called Her?
Yeah.
Where he falls in love with an operating system.
A very sexy
Scarlett Johansson operating system. But an operating system nonetheless that has no face, there is no expressions, there is no visual cues. It's just purely auditory.
But the voice is so
human and expressive that you can have a very nuanced relationship.
Yeah, my computer has Scarlett Johansson's sexy voice, and it sounded like a real person on the other end. I would totally voice recognition. The voice chat would be perfectly fine.
Right. Then it would make a lot more sense. It'd be more natural instead of talking at an Xbox and it accidentally turning off whenever you say something. But
it's
interesting.
It's gonna be very interesting because here we are, a generation that we know what the last generation dealt with in terms of their issue was interracial marriage or interracial couples was a big thing. That was a big dialectic in the last generations. In this generation,
right.
it's gay marriage. I think that by the time you and I and us, our grandparents, our grandchildren, the dialect that we'll have to solve and work out will be.
Can we marry machines?
Yes! Stop having sex with that robot. How dare you? Grandpa, but I love her. No, it's a robot.
Yes, I think you should be able to marry androids or robots.
Okay.
100%.
Well, marriage, as far as I'm concerned, marriage is two things. It's a legal contract, which doesn't really make any sense where you combine your assets. And then the other part of it is a social contract where you say you're committed to this person, and then you kind of have underlying things under that. So I don't see why either of those couldn't be done to anyone or anything. They're just contracts, right? I have a contract with my dog that I'm going to feed him and take him out for walks, pretty much. We didn't put it in writing, but, it's not, they're just contracts like anything else. They're important contracts, no doubt, but it's still, the whole concept of marriage seems like a somewhat, not outdated, but it's very useful and one of the bedrocks of society, but the structure that it has is very old and should probably be updated or modified. I think there should be something called a friend, a friend marriage or a friend social construct. Friends oftentimes, you ever have a really good friend, but then you start losing touch with them and you can't quite articulate that you miss them and you want them to be around more. Where's that friend contract that says, okay, you're one of my best friends. I need you to sign this or whatever. We're friends now. Okay? If you don't come over on Saturday, I'm gonna be really pissed off.
That's a problem.
I'm gonna sue you.
That exist. Like, we need to get a friend divorce.
No, it's true. There needs to be. That's basically just marriage. It's the same basic concept you're working with. So
that's so funny.
So yeah, I think the concept of marriage. I think if it's interracial marriage, yes or no, gay marriage, yes or no, it's going to be like marriage, yes or no in the future.
That's interesting.
And
it's going to be even more foundational, I guess.
Yeah. On the bright side, sex with machines and marriage with robots will help solve overpopulation. So.
So overpopulation's already in advanced societies is basically solving itself.
I think
the U.S. growth rate is going to stop pretty soon, and Japan's growth rate has stopped. It's negative now.
But I am curious to see what that's going to like. If we ever, I don't know how soon we're going to have anthropomorphic, human-like robots, but it'll be interesting to see how they integrate with society, because a lot of people are going to think that obviously it's going to be the same old thing. It's going to be like history is repeating itself. It's like, do they have rights? Do they not have rights? Are they just very, very powerful, very realistic caricatures of a human being, or are they human beings?
Yeah, I think that.
Are we all robots now because we just implanted all this shit in our brain? I don't know.
I mean, it seems to me that in society, rights are based on intelligence. If they found a monkey who was so smart that he was like building a society somewhere, you couldn't just go shoot that monkey, and the same rights to animals would apply to him.
Right.
So it seems that we have an implicit idea already to build up rights into intelligence. So I'm pretty sure if there was a pretty intelligent something that's artificial that happened or came into existence or what have you, from a pretty implicit standpoint, the same rights apply to human beings would be applied.
Right, exactly.
Pretty confident.
I immediately think, when we're having this conversation, I immediately think of the Animatrix, and that
that's what I thought too.
immediately, and I'm thinking about, holy shit, we're talking about the second Renaissance, that one animated short.
Yeah.
This is surreal because it's relevant. It's weird. It's science fiction, but it's relevant to us because the future's right around the corner.
We need to answer. These are questions science fiction authors have been trying to answer for a long time, and I think they're fascinating philosophical questions. They're Star Trek questions. They're Twilight Zone questions. They're bedrock kind of questions about the nature of man. And I think figuring them out before robots are here and talking to us and alive.
Saying, I need rights.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you
have figured it out before.
We passed rights for you a while back, and you're good. And you're like, you're good, dog. And they're like, oh, okay.
Either they'll ask, hey, or I need rights, or they will get their rights. Because I was just reading an article today. The U.S. military, the U.S. Army wants to they want 25% of their fighting force. They want it to be robots by a certain year.
Sure.
That's insane.
Well, I think that's awesome. First of all, the U.S. Army, they're starting to do some cool things. They used to be old and stodgy.
Well, I mean, the less human death that occurs, I think, the better.
See, there's the key. So,
but then again, the less fighting, the better too.
The concept of rights is based on the concept that the only sentient, really intelligent being that exists is a human being. That has never not been the case. And I guarantee you, if there were a bunch of other species that were as smart as humans but completely different, that rights as they exist today might not be this universal concept that we have. There's some giant, crazy, terrifying squid things that live on the other side of the world that just came and attacked us all the time. I don't think regardless of how intelligent they were, we wouldn't give a fuck about them,
Right.
So I don't. Right. So these are questions. These are fundamental, like kind of very alien questions, very science fiction questions that don't have simple answers.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if there's on foot warfare with on foot robots that whether it's just it'd be like Terminators running around and
I think with the problem is computer science from a computer science and an engineering standpoint, getting bipedal stuff it's just very, very hard.
Well, they have those what are those quadropods or those four-legged
they got that running cat shit. Yeah, holy fuck.
Yeah, I mean they're cool, but they flip over and then they can't get back up.
And no, they can get back up and almost scenario. They can run and carry shit with it.
Yeah, they can be on certain types of trains.
And then they can have mounted machine guns.
That's what I'm thinking.
They just be running and shooting and everything.
Because
awesome.
Again, this is the military industrial complex we're talking about. This is a $600 billion industry, and there's money for this thing. And mind you, technology grows exponentially. I think that robots are the nuclear weapons of the 21st century because 1945 the U.S. had the nuclear bomb. No one was gonna touch us. Now we have robots who the fuck is going to touch us? You know, hey,
Wow.
hey, Nicaragua, don't mess around. We're gonna send the robots. And we're like, oh shit.
Well, I think drone
Yeah.
strikes. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just people who press the button to create to kill someone. They're getting further and further away. I mean, from the person they're
They're
killing.
like desensitized.
Yeah, and that's a fundamental problem of society.
Whoops. I mean, back in the day when you had to fight hand-to-hand combat and you had to kill each other with swords or axes or samurai swords or whatever, there was a certain, you were very intimate.
Well, there's nobility in that. If you watch the first 5 minutes of Game of Thrones, where Ned Stark kills a guy himself with his own hands and tells his son, this is how it has to be done, this is our society.
Right.
There's a very important concept there where you're not removing, once again with Stephen Covey and the stick, you're not separating the action from the consequence.
Right. You're not just pressing a button and then 8,000 miles away a drone is killing someone.
Yeah, because every time a drone strikes something, for most cases, civilians are killed. I mean, people's there's weddings. People are being massacred at their own wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. And for what?
That's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, what are these in the grand scheme of things like?
And those are robots. Those are robots.
And here's the problem. I think that already Americans we're disconnected with war. Only a small percentage of us actually deal with the pain of war and having someone go to war. So imagine all of a sudden that fear is gone, that pain is gone, and now what about the rest of the world? What about what are they gonna do when all of a sudden we give zero fucks about going to war with someone else because we can just send robots?
Well, hopefully, information technology is all about connecting those dots.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the sad truth of it is the reason we're at war is because of energy. Oil, but other energy reserves, strategic resources. I mean, it's the same reason why we were at war in the 19th century for coal.
There's always an ulterior motive.
Well, but that's the funny thing about war is really that's just the motive. It's really right there. It's just when I say resources, I also mean money and people, and anyone goes to war for the same reason because they think they can come out richer when they come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And any nation in the entire world,
which is very sad, but.
Well, but the sad thing is, of course, energy is what powers technology. Energy is what all this, and then what they would say in the Joe Rogan podcast. I think Duncan Trussell might have said this, but someone said this once. All this stuff that we're making, I think it was him, it all comes out of the ground. All this stuff needs to be mined. You need to mine all of the elements to make that iPhone, that new piece of technology. So all of these things are connected.
And there's laborers that are putting these devices together.
Yeah,
in factories.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. There's always human suffering connected to a lot of these things, and so it's hard to disconnect a lot of that. I would hope that in the future, in a smarter society, we're not going to war with other countries. We're not fighting other countries because of energy. Hopefully there's some way we can. I don't know.
I mean, I think a much
locally or something or shared energy.
Yeah, I mean,
energy's a problem. It's a legitimate problem.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and even scarier, I think, is maybe not scarier, but a more immediate issue that's going to be coming up is actually on our own soil, where we have drones that are monitoring our streets and highways, and have the agency to kill a human being. I think that's something that is going to happen in the near future, and also the fact that we have a government that can basically hold our entire life's data and do whatever they want with it.
I think the data thing is going to happen. That's the future. Everyone's data everywhere all the time. I do agree with that. The drone thing.
Strategic assassinations. I mean, you can car hack someone's car, and in fact, I've read stories about this where some journalist goes too far down a rabbit hole, and the government has the technological capability, if it's a new car, to hack his car and basically put his car on full gas and just drive him into a wall.
Yeah.
So that's something that I forget the exact story if you could pull it up, but what's the name?
Michael Hastings. Yeah,
that's the one.
Michael Hastings thing.
And then that shit happened, and then all of a sudden, within a few days, it's dead silence in the media about what really happened, and it's just a dead story. But you think that stuff's happening now, all the crazy cyberpunk dystopia shit that we've been reading about and thinking about for decades since the 80s, or even before that. That is already happening.
It's starting to bubble up, but I'm pretty optimistic though. I think there's a lot of people out there who are connected to a lot of information, and this might sound weird, but there's still plenty of rednecks with guns who, for better or for worse, will there's a lot of people who would hold out if there were drones flying around the United States who are armed. I guarantee you there would be almost like new age militias started up that just vow to shoot every single drone they see out of the sky.
See, now I think that's a very interesting point. There is, parts of our culture that, like you said, for better or for worse, are more prone to aggression.
In that case, it's definitely.
And I'm not going to say any geographies in particular, but I will say that there are people in the United States that are more aggressive and impulsive than others, and they will rise up in a conflict, which I guess. In this particular case, if we had drones that were taking over the world, and you're absolutely right, I'm sure there would be militias popping up.
I'd fucking buy a gun. The problem is, in civilized society, we're too plugged into the system,
Right.
Because the problem, I mean, it's crazy because when you hit the nail on the head earlier, it's about information and the internet, and we need to protect this thing called the internet, because this is our river of information, and we are seeing all around the world that places like Egypt and right now in Ukraine, the governments are damming up this river, and I think information is a raw material and necessary to the function of a happy and prosperous society. If it wasn't for the freedom of information that we have, we would be North Korea. And because it's crazy. I think that my fear, and I don't know, is getting drone striked and then being erased from the internet as if I never existed.
Well, I don't see that. I mean, honestly, I don't think that's going to happen.
I think totally.
I think trying to stop the internet is trying to stop the what is the Mississippi River with a bunch of paper towels. I just don't think.
Well, maybe not totally erased, but there could be enough modification going on where it would just be too difficult to follow the story and figure out what really happens that people just wouldn't even try.
I think when you have 20 people in a radius outside the drone strike who see what happened, who all have cell phone cameras. I see it being completely the opposite. I think you talk about drone strikes today, but there's been billions of horrific things that have happened unjustly to people throughout human history, and drone strikes or not, I see those things as being as going down over time in the general case, and so I'm very firm in my belief in the positivity and progress in the future.
I'm naturally optimistic, but at the same time, we're talking about the same government that used to slash Martin Luther King's tires, the same government that gave children in Guatemala syphilis in 1954.
So not to cut you off, but just be careful, because the more if you worry too much and you're too cynical, at a certain point you realize you're 40 years old, your kids are doing something, there's a new form of entertainment your kids are doing in the living room that you're not sure about. Your delivery system for Amazon, so you don't want, you're not sure about
those drones are coming after us.
And you realize that you're old and curmudgeonly, and you're too old to be able to you have to, to be able to adopt to the new ways of thinking, and you fall into the same trap that people, the previous generation is falling into. So
that's interesting.
It's
that's a really interesting thought.
There's a lot of things to worry about, but I look at it from a statistical standpoint. I look at it, throughout the whole of human history, things are pretty fucking good if you compare them to 100 years ago.
I agree.
I think they're going to get a lot better.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and thank you for bringing that up. I think that from my personal view, yes, I'm aware of the fucked up shit that is happening, because I need to be grounded in reality to have a valuable view of the world, but at the same time,
it's a double-edged sword. Information is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You're aware of all the things happening, all the terrible things that are happening across the world, because you can be aware. So it's difficult. It's difficult to live or die by every human tragedy.
But at the same time, I don't shut down. I think that it's important for us to adapt, to move forward with progress, because I think if you try to fight progress, you're just gonna get left behind. And so this is what you do. You move along, you adapt, and you try to ride this river and see if you can find a small niche to channel your creativity and yourself through. But I think It's this has been a fascinating conversation. I did
Yeah,
not think.
we've gotten pretty deep.
It's a brave new world.
Yeah. Climb out of this insane rabbit hole we've gotten ourselves.
let's well let's just very quickly. I'm sure you guys are running short on time. Let's what's up with Survios in the future? What can people look forward to? Anything you want to add?
I don't know how much detail we can go into yet, but we're definitely in a very short order. We're going to be expanding our team pretty rapidly, and we're going to be putting up a lot of videos and content on our website and expanding our website probably close to the middle of this year. And eventually, I would look for some very interesting full motion VR applications and content that we're working on. I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, just get ready for some kick-ass products coming in the future. Kick-ass products and projects.
And zombies.
And lots of zombies.
I know everyone's doing zombies these days, but I swear to God, everyone loves them.
Yeah.
And you can't get enough. So I think there are other
zombies are the best.
They are very detailed. But I will say that we're working on a lot of different game demos, and we're trying to try a lot of different content for different demographics. Not just like hyper action violent shooters. Like we want to explore other cool stuff too. But I don't know. Like right now, we're very much in a process of exploration and discovery, and just trying to learn like what we can do with this technology and where we think it's going to go. And it's really infinite possibilities. So we're doing a whole lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
But yeah. So definitely keep your ears peeled for some updates from us soon.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming.
Yeah.
So excited.
I'm so excited.
Some stuff going on with Sixth Sense too, so it's going to be pretty cool.
I'm truly really excited for this. I just if I can under the table sort of drop this on you guys, like perhaps dinosaurs could be something later on that might, because I that would be fucking awesome.
Dude, Velociraptors, Jurassic Park in virtual reality.
Turok the Dinosaur Hunter was my big interactive dinosaur thing. That was when it was like Jurassic Park and the raptors coming right at you, but you actually had to like take your gun out and figure out a way to kill the velociraptors charging at you.
I never played that.
Turok was a great game way back in the day. N64.
N64? Okay.
Early days.
I was a PlayStation 1 guy.
Yeah, this is
way
way back when.
Yeah, we can go off on the PlayStation N64 conversation for hours. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Nathan Burba, James Iliff. Dude, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on your podcast.
This is fun. Yeah, thanks.
It's a really, really great conversation. This was a blast.
Awesome. Looking forward to the next time we do this.
Yeah, absolutely.